Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Talk with TQ and the Energy Stoners Cafe. As always, I try to find the most interesting guests I can find on the planet to present to you. Well, tonight I have a great guest. Her name is Frania Shelley-Grielen. She is an animal behaviorist. She's also an author. She's written a couple of books, and her latest book is what I'm so anxious to talk to her about tonight. Frania, tell me the title of the book. Tell us all about it.
So my newest book is called Behavior Matters for Cats and Dogs. And that's what the topic is about behavior matters, and because behavior matters for cats
Yeah.
and dogs.
And it's not really about just being obedient.
No.
It probably, I imagine, if it's like your other book, it's very much about understanding what your animal is trying to say to you.
Yes, absolutely. In addition to dealing with the topics of the most common issues that people will present to animal behavior professionals, like for cats, unacceptable elimination, multi-cat aggression, cat-human aggression, dogs, again, we're going to talk about reactivity, aggression, separation anxiety. I go into detail on working with these various different behaviors, but I also take a look and a little bit of a deeper dive into the science, applied animal behavior, communication, body language, the difference with the species, because you're absolutely correct. So much of this is really about taking a look at the perspective of the animal, of how different than they are with us in terms of their senses and in terms of how they communicate. So it's breaking it down.
Now, a lot of times people, what's the word I hear? They anthropomorphize. They
Anthropomorphize
or you're right,
advertising.
I was close.
Yes,
Yeah, they
very,
do that.
very.
They put human behavior and assign it to their pet, but it's not always like that. And I, having owned pets, I owned dogs in particular, I see that if you make a mistake with that and you're thinking that they're trying to communicate something else because you're applying your human behavior to theirs, often you can make great mistakes in caring for them, unintentionally. So how is this book different from the first book?
Well, I think in this book, I go more into detail and I take more each one of these topics that have come up. And I say that because I mentioned some of those, what's the most common. So these are the topics that will come up. Clients will consult professionals about this. People are surrendering animals to shelters because of these things. So any number of those concerns, we want to kind of look at and say, how can we craft we called it intervention, in order to be able to kind of change that behavior, modify that behavior, and also to deepen the understanding. So I think with this book, it's more of a comprehensive resource that I want people to be able to have, to be able to look at that stuff. And it has to start, obviously, with the natural history, with understanding the body language, with understanding the species. So I start with the cats and have a whole chapter on that, and then go into the individual concerns, and then do the same thing with the dogs. And then I have a cats and dogs section as well. So.
Okay, so you have a section for cats and a section for dogs,
And then a section for cats and dogs.
and a section for cats and dogs.
Right.
Okay. I have to ask you this question because it's so on my mind these days. There are a lot of things happening with climate change. I'm thinking about the wildfires
Mhm.
that are happening, I think still happening in California. We've had some here in northern New York state, in the past. And I find that everybody's talking about the celebrities and their homes, and I can't help thinking about the animals that are, indigenous to the area, as well as house pets. How can one deal with that? And the other part of that question is it is not uncommon for people to adopt, I'd say, rescue dogs that and cats that have fallen victim to these things. What commentary do you have on that? Because it's done so often.
So it's a good question, but it's a big question. You asked a lot of, there's a lot of parts of that. So I would
Yeah.
say I'm going to start with the last part of it and then kind of work back into it. I think that certainly when we talk about rescue, anytime we're bringing an animal from a different background, we're dealing with an animal that's been through trauma. So whether it's just leaving the home, people will bring in not just an animal to a shelter because they're eliminating in the wrong place. They'll do it because they're old. They don't want to pay for the medical care. They're moving. I mean, there's any number of a marriage is ending, a relationship has changed. Somebody's all of a sudden allergic, or there's a new baby. There's just a million different reasons why we see this. But that change is extremely traumatic. That change to go from a familiar environment into a new environment is incredibly traumatic, even sometimes more so for cats than for dogs, because cats are really more attached to home and don't really get to be any place but that home. The dog gets out and sees more. So you're always dealing with a degree of trauma. And what people instantaneously want is they want, the animal to be set and settled, and that takes time. And so the biggest thing with that is to allow for the time for them to decompress, the time for them to rest, the time for them to settle into that place. It's interesting when you talk about the wildfires, because a lot of these animals, if they didn't get to go along, now are in these really scary places where they're trying to find shelter and they're trying to look for safety. I don't know if you saw it on the news, but there's a story that I saw very recently in California where there was a huge bear that had burrowed under what was left of a house because he couldn't find shelter and he didn't know where he was, and the whole place had burned down around him. So this is not just even confined to our cats and dogs. Okay. And I'm sorry, I've got a cat that's like playing soccer in the background. You hear that? With his favorite toy is bottle caps. It doesn't matter what I buy him. So sorry. So it doesn't just affect our pets. It's also affecting every animal when the environment has been destroyed, or when is being decimated. And there's trauma for each one of these animals where this is happening to.
Yeah, it's very, very unsettling to think about. And I know that I have a really lovely neighbor where I live now, and she had rescued a dog from Puerto Rico.
That's a
And
big change.
yeah. So, but the dog is real happy. Diego is happy dog. And I said to her, I said, does Diego speak Espanol? And she says, probably. I said, do you speak it? She didn't speak Spanish. I started speaking to him in Spanish. Every now and then I'll say, and he'll actually respond. He'll perk up like he recognizes the language. People don't realize how sensitive these beasts are, these little beasts. You know,
Absolutely.
they are so, ugh. And she was saying, when are you going to get a dog? I said, I have to wait till I'm ready because I won't get a dog before I'm ready. So many people just get a dog because it's almost like an accessory to their wardrobe often.
And I think that's a funny thing. I said this in my first book. I think I wrote about this, where people would kind of apologize to me when they found out what I did. That's just New York. Outside. So, but
Yeah.
people would apologize to me for not having pets. And they would say, you probably think, but I don't think I can handle the responsibilities. I don't think that I'm able to do this. And I would actually support and applaud that, because what you're saying, I'm not ready, or I don't have the this, or I don't have the that,
Mhm.
is just so much more responsible and we talk about responsible pet ownership, how important that is. But this is just so much more responsible than getting the animal. And then I have to walk it 4 times a day. I have to clean the litter box. I have to do
Yeah.
all these things to maintain this animal in our home environment. They're not free living, so they're really dependent on us for everything. And it is a lot of responsibility. I mean, it's a lot of joy too, right? We've had cats and dogs and various pets in our lives, and we know how rich that companionship is, but it comes with the responsibility of care.
Yeah, there's a lot of responsibility. And I'm seeing like vet bills. People don't realize if you get a dog, you're going to have to get, or any animal, but you're going to have to pay for vet bills. You're going to have to pay for
Yep.
shots. It's not just the food. The food is the cheapest part of the whole deal, but the vet bills, they have to get inoculated. I don't have to tell you.
Yeah, right. So you obviously have to provide for their medical care. I
Hmm.
mean, this is one of the reasons why animals who are in our care will live longer than natural living animals. I mean, that's a whole argument, right? I mean,
Hmm.
eh, are they happier if they can do whatever they want, as opposed to we're the ones telling them when they can and what they can do. But we keep them free from provide shelter, we provide food, we keep them free from harm, we keep them free from sickness, because you talk about the dogs and the vets, and uh, I mean, ticks and fleas and just all the parasites that one is exposed to in a natural environment. I could just go on, but yes, so you have to, those things do add up. And then what about grooming? Are you grooming?
Grooming, yes,
Grooming,
is
right?
important.
Dog
You
sitting, pet, when you go on vacation, right?
hmm
What,
I know. Yes, exactly. People don't realize what that costs.
and do you want to know, it's so interesting, people say, I just have to say this, people will say that um, pet services industry, pet is like recession proof, but what we spend the most money on are things. We like to buy things for our pets. I
Yes.
wish people would spend more on like behavior and training, force-free behavior and force-free training. And so you kind of have this pyramid, right? Where we've got the pet retail is like the biggest portion of it. And then we kind of go up, as what we're willing to spend money on.
Yeah, yeah.
We like buying stuff for our pets.
We
That's for sure.
do. We do. And we tend to indulge them as if they're human. Like I gave my dog a retirement party when she retired from guiding eyes. I gave her a retirement party. There were more pets, there were more animals at the party in the backyard than there were people at the party, and she got a ton of stuff.
Well, I'm sure she enjoyed having all those dogs and people paying attention to her.
And she liked the gifts.
Sure,
She did.
absolutely.
Well, you knew Lillian.
Yes, I did. She was a great dog.
Now, tell me about this book. How is it different? Tell me what inspired you to write it. Because a lot of my listeners have read the first book.
Okay, so I think I probably touched on this, but I it came with the pandemic was part of it. The pandemic and what people did and where everybody wanted to have a cat or a dog. I can remember I even wanted to foster a dog when this was going on. I live in New York City and I wanted to go to, and they didn't have any dogs. They didn't
Oh,
there were so many people, everybody had a dog. Everybody had a dog. And at the time, I had lost my dog. I had a Cocker Spaniel, Daisy, for 14 years. And I'm with you, and like it's really hard to be ready because you want your dog back, right? You don't just want a dog. But I was like, I'm gonna foster a dog. But I had a cat. And so every dog they wanted to give me, they were like, well, we don't know how good they are with cats because we can't really test them, because of COVID restrictions and all the rest of this. So I would check in every once in a while. But what starts to happen when the pandemic is over, and this is something that I'm hearing from all the time. So I have a little bit of a bias anyway, because people are coming to me with issues. In addition to writing about this, I do the applied animal behavior. So I'm working with people who are having issues with their animals. But we start to see a lot of surrender. And so it's not just separation anxiety, which I'll just do a quick little segue with that. I think that's more about that we all had schedules when we were working and then we didn't. And that was also probably very upsetting to the dogs, more than that they were upset that we weren't there or were there. But anyway, so after the pandemic, people all of a sudden say, hey, wait a minute, you start to see this return, this surrender, and so we've got a tremendous problem where the city shelters, and I'm sure goes through with any metropolitan area throughout, are at critical capacity, and some of them are not even accepting cats and dogs. Can't take them.
Wow.
And so what happens now is you've got people who are dumping these animals. You can't really say to someone, we're not taking them, because what they'll do is well, I'll just let them go. And they do. And so we've got cats on the street, we've got dogs on the street, and we already know that behavior is the number one reason for surrender and the number reason for consulting. But I thought, okay, I know what people are coming to me about. I know what I've taught when I was teaching, what the questions were, and I know what comes up over and over again. And if we could and I know people are reluctant to always bring someone in. And sometimes there's that issue of self-interpretation, like, well, I know, and I don't have anybody to tell me, and it's just a cat or it's just a dog. But so, they should listen to me. So I thought, well, what if I could give you the toolbox, if I could give you a more in-depth way to look at this and to understand it and to then try to apply some of these things, so that we could kind of change that so that everybody could be happier and that we could keep those forever homes forever,
Yeah.
take them home kind of, yeah. So that was that was a lot of it, is I really thought, it doesn't have to be this way. We don't have to, the kitten grows up and it's not so cute and cuddly and now it's scratching the couch. Well, what about, let's talk about how to what we can do to have them scratch this, not that,
Does that always work?
there's a little bit of, tweaking with that, but you can definitely supply them with, what's the function? What do they need? They need to be able to scratch. Well, let's give them a place that they can do it and make it just as attractive as what they're going for. So sometimes what it is it's a preference for a certain kind of a surface, or, people will buy these flimsy things to hang on a wall, on a doorknob. And the cat really, part of this, the behavior is that they really want to stretch. It's a stretching, it's a flexing, it's stripping of claws. So you need something sturdy, and then the covering matters,
Mhm.
so it just gets into really kind of looking at what's the criteria that they're going for, and how can we give them something they can use instead of our stuff, right?
Right. Yeah. I wonder if it's really with the cats. I'm not as familiar with cats, although I did have a cat once, but I was very allergic to it. And then I had to surrender the cat to who became my ex-husband, and so he kept the cat. But I just remember this cat was just so, um, there were things I did not understand about cats. I'm wondering, can a dog person, someone that's more acclimated to having dogs, can they really adjust to having a cat? And what about the fact that cats crawl all over everything, but somehow they don't seem to always knock it down? Do you have to often train the pet owner to manage the pet? Is there a training session that should actually happen with pet owners? I know what happens when you work for organizations like I did, volunteer for like Guiding Eyes. I was always in training, you know?
Right. So they wanted to, and what they probably work with you with is to understand the natural history of the animal. How does this animal, how do they live in their natural environment? What are their needs? What do they look for? So when you talked about the cat crawling on top of everything, the cat is both prey and predator,
Mm-hmm.
and it is arboreal, likes to be up in trees. So cats want raised resting spaces. So if we provide for them a place, people will put the cats on the countertop. Yeah, because that's the highest place that it
Right.
can get to.
Yeah.
And so if we can put in every room a raised resting space, then the animal can access it and they're going to feel safer and they're going to be happier up there. And that's like and sometimes, okay, well, I don't want to buy those cat treat. Okay, but maybe you have on a side counter or in a dresser in your room, you could put a cat bed on top of your existing furniture and they can access that raised resting space. So if you look at it where, yes, to train the person or the person to get a better understanding of what this animal's needs are, their biological needs, and the way they would be drawn to that for safety, because prey and predator, right? I
Yeah.
feel safer up here.
Mhm.
A big tip if you had cats and dogs, that's one of the biggest things is, does the cat have a place to go to get away from the dog? And they're gonna want to be something, and there's also ground level that you want to provide for them. But I think that kind of illuminating what their behavior is like is something, the natural behavior of the animal. You want to be, because we can stop them from doing things, but we're frustrating something, and then you could get into displacement, it's trauma, they're not
Mhm.
happy, and who wants that?
Yeah, no one wants an unhappy pet. That's no one. I don't want to see any animal unhappy.
Mm-mm, mm-mm.
Not everybody's an animal lover. There are people that just don't understand people like me and people like you. They don't understand, like, it's a dog, it's a cat, it's a deer, it's a goose. What do you care? You know, they're out there, they can take care of themselves. They're all over the place. We don't like that. Exterminate it.
Well, I think I mean, on the one hand, you look at the whole concept of pet, and it really is more of a Western concept. So you go into, a lot of places in Europe, you go into South America, and you'll see like the village dog. You don't really have people that are keeping these dogs in their homes. And a lot of these dogs are very well socialized, they're fed, they're cared for. There's not an aggression problem, there's not a reactivity problem. But the people like them. They're very well tolerated. So you've got a lot of free roaming dogs in Italy. I mean, even the whole concept of the shepherd, when people were first keeping cats and dogs, we weren't, putting collars on them and training them up and putting them in our houses. They were just kind of doing their own thing. So we have changed that a lot to that. I will say, and for a lot of these animals, there's that story again of who's happier, the cat that gets to do whatever he wants. I mean, the British kind of think that we're terrible that we keep our cats inside, and I'm making a generalization,
Yeah.
but in general, like, what do you mean the cat can't go out? I live in Manhattan. My cats are not going out ever,
Hmm.
and so, yeah, even if I wasn't, I think I would have good reason to keep them inside, but that's another conversation. To your other points of the kind of ways people look at it, I think this is one of the things that, when I was teaching students, I would say when they didn't like a certain species, looked at all different kinds. I would say the more you study it, the more you'll love there's something you will fall in love with the animal. But you are correct there is an attitude of animals are here for us and we are in charge of them. And, there's this kind of military don't challenge aspect to it. I mean, I am a force-free training and behavior professional, But I won't tell you that punishment doesn't work. Punishment is a very effective way to get someone to do something. Um, However, when I talk to people about this, I will also say that the science will not tell you that it's not effective, but it would also tell you that you're going to get fear. Whoever's dispensing the punishment, the animal is going to be terribly afraid of. You're going to get trauma from that, and you're going to get what's called displacement behaviors, where they'll start to do things because of the punishment. And so when people come and they were resistant to that, I try to lead with the science with that, that this is something that we should not be doing. We also want not just an animal not to challenge us, but we want push button. We want them to do what we say when we say it. And so we'll put shock collars on them
Mm.
and try to get them to do things that way. And the problem with that is we're not even delivering punishment effectively, because the animal has to associate the pain with
With the behavior.
within seconds.
Hmm.
Within
Yeah.
seconds, or they have no idea. And so what happens is you'll work with these people who've had this, and the animal is just so shell shocked because they never know, and they're just on guard, and they're just so anxious all the time.
Yeah.
So you can really, really mess someone up, that animal doing that.
Yeah. It seems it's become more common, that kind of thing. We only have like a minute left. I know when you talk about the collars, I know that there's some cities that I know of that actually do things to keep animals from like urinating in certain areas,
Mhm.
and they actually make it so when they do try to urinate, they get a shock, and it's going right to their private parts when they do it. Walking, my dog was just, or not even my dog, someone else's dog, lifted his leg and was like, and he was like so harmed.
It's barbaric, but I would also say that people who put up fencing, people will put up electric fences around their homes, and you'll see studies
Yeah.
will show you the animal will go through the fence because it really is a question of motivation. And this is the problem with that too, is if they really want the thing, they'll deal with it, they'll persevere through it, but they don't want to come back because
Wow.
they know that they just went through that. It's so painful that they don't want to return. Not just are we not even putting it in public places, which is really objectionable, but they're starting to use electric fencing with cattle, with
Ah,
farm animals. So we're just, and so when you start to kind of open that door and say that's okay, um, some cities and some countries have outlawed the use of these devices. And then there's also some proponents who will say, oh, well, it should only be people who know what they're doing. But a lot of the research, when they've looked at even professional trainers working with them, they're not using them the right way. So it's a really difficult thing. I don't advocate for it. It's not humane, it's not ethical. And most of the time, not only is it inhumane and ethical, but it's not effective because people aren't using it. And you say, well, I could use it properly. You would still have the ethical and the humane, and then the fear and the pain and the trauma that you would be delivering along with that.
and we don't want to do that to any living thing.
Mm-mm.
You know, I want to talk to you more about the book at some point, and I want to invite you to come back and discuss this more, because I'm seeing people are just like adopting animals. In my opinion, I think some people shouldn't be adopting animals, but that's just my opinion. And maybe I'm misinformed or uninformed about a few things, and I don't think I'm alone with that. But I do plan on getting another dog. No, there'll never be another dog like my Lillian, as you know. She was so special, pathologically obedient, perpetually adorable.
But
So
that's what dogs are, right? I mean,
yes.
dogs love us. They're one of the most forgiving, dogs and horses
Mm-hmm.
too,
Horses.
really. Yeah, we wouldn't have domesticated the animals that we have if they weren't so forgiving of us. That was part of the condition, that was part of the requirement for them to, come along with us and co-evolve with us in this kind of path that we've come along with. I mean, we owe dogs and cats so much in terms of of helping us to discover and get rid of pests and hunt and do all the things that they've done. And I do think, and I would love for people to pick up the book, to read the book, to read about behavior, because behavior really does matter. And the more that we know about the animals that we bring into our lives and their behavior, the happier that everybody, cat, dog, and human being, is going to be on that journey.
And yeah, so like we can leave it there for now, but I do want to talk to you about that because I have like such a plethora of questions for you, and it's just not enough for half an hour. So I'm going to ask you if you'll come back and
I would love to.
okay, and we'll talk more about this because it's such an important subject to me. And I always want to consult with you, because I know you, and I'm not going to get a dog until I finish consulting with you about getting a dog for myself because I want to make the right decision. And if a dog speaks another language, I'll learn that language, you know? Hey, listen, Diego speaks English now. He understands English. I love that little dog. Saw him just before I came in before. And I said, how apropos. I'm thinking I'm going to talk to Frania tonight. And now there's Diego with his owner. So happy.
It's so wonderful. They really make your day, don't they?
They do. And the
Yeah.
owner, Rosemary, was saying, get a dog, just get one. It's like, I'm going to get one when the time is right. But on that note, the time is up.
Okay.
So, but thank you so much. I know your schedule is so busy, and I really appreciate you making time to come on the show. I really
Well,
do. Thank you so much, Franya.
well, thank you for having me, and I will always love to come back. Love talking to you, Toni. Thank you. I really
Likewise.
appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much. I'll say goodbye to the audience. And until next time, I promise I will bring the most interesting people that I can find on the planet for you. Goodbye.